All right, look, I know this show is getting a lot of hate right now, and there's a lot of controversy, but I think we can all collectively agree that the one thing we cannot accuse this show of being is predictable, because holy shit. Intro.
Don't change the channel, don't touch that dial. We got it all on UHF. Take off your sneakers.
Hey guys, it's Kevin and Marvy for Game of Thrones Season 8, Episode 5, The Bells, and wow, this was quite an episode for sure. I mean, there is a lot to dissect here, there's a lot to really get into, but I will just say right up front, this was an episode that I was very much hyped for, especially coming off the way last week's episode ended, and knowing that this seemed like it was going to be what we wanted Winterfell to be. This was going to be the episodes where heads will roll, there's going to be all these casualties, there's going to be all these big character conflicts that are coming to a head here, and it really seemed like that's what we were building up to. And I will say right up front, maybe because of how much I was anticipating this episode, that might be why when I first watched it, it did let me down. I'm not going to lie to you. The first time I saw this episode, last night, I wasn't a fan of it. And a lot of that, I think, is less of, this didn't make sense, and it was more to me that a lot of what they were setting up in these last 8 seasons did not seem like on track with what they did here. But then I took a rewatch of the episode because, the more I thought about it, I'm like, you know what, maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe there are some things that do make a lot of sense. And honestly, on a rewatch, I love this episode a lot more. And I'll say right now, I think a lot of my initial, dislikement of this episode, it was more of, oh, that wasn't well done. And, it was less of, oh, that wasn't well done. And more of just, they did not do the thing that I wanted them to do, therefore it's bad. And that's not the case. I mean, there's a lot of things they did here that, yeah, I did not expect to happen, but I love the fact that they went in the directions that they did. I love the fact that they made this so unpredictable. I mean, the whole show essentially is recontextualized now, and trust me, there's a lot to get into, but we're just going to get into it right now. So before we get into all of the utter chaos and all the shocking things that happened in this episode, we have to first talk about the beginning, which I thought they did a really great job with really setting everything up here. And if there's one thing I can say is that while I do still think some things in this episode are kind of rushed, this is definitely not one of them. I thought the whole beginning of this episode was beautifully done. We start off and very quickly Daenerys finds out that Tyrion has told Varys, and that Varys knows about Jon's true parentage and how he has this plan where he wants to get Daenerys off the throne and, then put Jon on it. And I love the scene where Varys and Jon are talking, and Jon just straight up tells him, I don't want it. I never have. It's not something I'm interested in. And look, I've been saying this for a long time. Jon is just not qualified to be on the throne. Now, that might change after the events of this episode, but at least up till now, Jon has remained that oath keeper. He's someone who he sticks to his values. He says something and he very much does stick by it, and he doesn't usually waver all that much. And we definitely do see something of that here. He's mentioned before that he doesn't want the throne. That's not going to change now. Even though Varys, we can see, is very much lobbying for it, Jon is just not interested. And I thought this was definitely a very interesting scene. I definitely did not expect for Varys to die here. I did not expect for something like that to occur. The moment where Varys does die really sets in motion a lot of what we do get later on, because before Varys dies, he says maybe the most important thing in the entire episode, where he says, I hope I'm wrong. I hope that I deserve this. And, Tyrion saying goodbye to him and everything, and it's a very heartbreaking scene, but at the time, it's like, okay, yeah, Varys is wrong here, but of course, once we get later into the episode, I think that's a conversation that Tyrion is very much going to be hearkening back to and probably replaying in his head for a long time now, and I love the way that scene was done with, Daenerys saying Dracarys and everything like that. All of that was great, and I thought they did a very good job at laying the groundwork there. However, the big moment with Daenerys, of course, before all of the, what she ends up doing, is this conversation with Jon, where even though she knows that he has told her before that you are my queen, I don't have any interest in you beyond that, you are my aunt, and so therefore I don't want to be in a relation with you romantically, Winterfell, that might be the way you do things in Meereen, but it's not the way we do things in, Winterfell, and, he's been very adamant about that. He's very much maintained that attitude. And even though that is the case, Daenerys still tries one last time to see if that's going to change. And you can see how desperate she is. You can see that Jon at this point is really the only person she has left on her side besides Tyrion. But even Tyrion, you can tell she doesn't really trust because Tyrion still went to Varys. So she doesn't really trust him either. Jon is really the only person at this point, besides like Grey Worm and people like that, that she really does trust. But that moment where he basically tells her, he's not gonna do it and nothing's gonna change, she gives that line where she says, all right then, fear will lie, or something like that. And her saying that really, I think, does confirm why she decides to take the course of action she takes later on in the episode. But that was such a fantastic scene. I love the way that was done. And then the last thing to talk about, really before we get into the things you guys want me to talk about, is the conversation between Jaime and Tyrion, which I'm not going to lie to you, the only thing I did not like about this episode is where they decided to go with Jaime, because, we ended things off last week, and he told Brienne that, he was guilty of what Cersei was doing, and I thought that he was going off to kill Cersei, and that his plan is he realizes that, I'm just as guilty, I need to put a stop to it. Nobody else is going to do it. I need to put a stop to Cersei's antics. I need to be the person to, go after her before things get worse. Obviously, he didn't know what happened to Daenerys and things like that at that point. But I thought that's what he was going to do. In this episode, on the other hand, that's not really the case anymore. He straight up tells Tyrion that he didn't really care about anyone except for Cersei, and that Cersei's the person that matters to him the most. Tyrion kind of has devised this plan where he is going to make sure that Cersei and Jaime get out of this alive. They're going to go over to this island and things like that, and, Tyrion knows the city is going to fall. I love that moment where Jaime is, he's not convinced that they're going to lose, but Tyrion's like, no, the city is going to fall. He's very steadfast in that belief. And again, that's because, we know what they've been planning. They already know what they're going to get themselves into. So Daenerys, Jon, Tyrion, they've all pretty much concocted this plan of like, this is how it's going to go, and this is how we are going to win. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. We are going to win this time, and you can see that Tyrion is very much, again, he is very much encouraging Jaime, like, no, you got to get out of here. And again, as much as I didn't like what they did with Jaime, the moment that did get me is, in that same scene where Tyrion says to Jaime that you are really the only person that didn't treat me like a monster, and how much he cares about him. And that was such a touching scene. I love the way that was done. And they've done a really great job this season of getting a lot of characters that haven't had a lot of screen time in the past few seasons, and getting them to rekindle, and getting them and reminding us why we like their bonding so much, why we enjoy these character interactions. And Jaime and Tyrion, I think, is a very good example of that. What they've done with them this season is fantastic, and that scene definitely really did get me, because they don't know if this is the last time they're going to see each other. Tyrion hopes that that's not the case, but we don't know if this is the last time at that point, and I really loved the way that was done. Such a fantastic scene. Peter Dinklage and Nikolaj Coster-Waldau just acted the hell out of it, and I love the way all of that was done. And again, it perfectly sets up what ends up transpiring, for the rest of this episode. But of course, we got to get into the real meat and potatoes of this episode, everything that goes down at King's Landing. I don't think anyone was really expecting this at all. And that's what I said, like, in the beginning of this review, of course. Like, regardless if you like these decisions or not, nobody anticipated what was going to happen here. But that being said, they do such a great job of really setting everything up. That moment when Cersei's in the tower and, you can see basically the majority of this episode is her staring at the window pretty much. But, of course, before they do attack, Tyrion tells them, like, if the bells are going to ring and they surrender, that's when we stop. We've won at that point and there's no reason for us to continue fighting. So their initial plan is basically, they're going to get into King's Landing. They're going to get past the Scorpions and the Golden Company and things like that, and then of course they're gonna get to Cersei. At least that's what they thought was gonna happen. Turns out Dany has a different course of action. She decides to do something far more destructive, and look, at first, I did not like this idea at all. I did not like the idea that all this time we've been seeing Daenerys as someone who was, sure, she definitely had that tyrannical side to her, the side where she isn't really willing to listen to reason. She definitely does do some irrational things, but she always had people by her side, and, she always seemed to somehow sidestep that. She always seemed to, take the right course of action. And, so I just didn't believe up to that, all this time that Daenerys would be evil. But then I really thought, she's pretty much lost everyone at that point. At that point, she had people like Missandei. She had people like Varys and Jon and Tyrion who were backing her. At this point, she knows she has no one. Nobody is really supporting her at this point, minus the Dothraki and Grey Worm and things like that. But other than that, nobody is really supporting her, so it makes sense for her to do what she does. And especially the moment where she is looking at the site of, where Missandei was just killed and where, of course, Rhaegal was killed last week. So obviously, yeah, she is no longer interested in just killing Cersei. She now views King's Landing as a complete and utter, it pretty much for her is a place that needs to burn. The entire city pretty much needs to repay. She doesn't care if it's an innocent civilian. She doesn't care if it's a mother. She doesn't care if it's a child. If they're in King's Landing, they are her enemy. And that's pretty much how Daenerys views it at this point. So when she goes in there, and you think at first she's just going to kill, all the people that are working for Euron and the Golden Company, but no, she keeps going. She's not going to the Red Keep, you realize. She's going to just destroy anything that's in her way, any building, anything like that, and it is absolute destruction at this point. And again, I know it can take a lot to process for sure, seeing this drastic shift that Daenerys did take, but it really isn't all that drastic because there were moments throughout the show where they planted this. It's just we were on Daenerys' side all this time that we did not expect her to do something to this extent. We did not expect that she was capable of doing something this monstrous. I mean, this is worse than what Cersei has done up to this point. Sure, Cersei has committed mass murder before, but she never murdered the entire King's Landing. Like, she never did something like that. She murdered the people that she wanted to die. But Daenerys, on the other hand, is killing literally everyone at this point. And it really does, and again, considering how much Daenerys has lost and how much this city has, how much bad blood is in this city, it makes sense that she no longer views it as this is her mission to kill Cersei. This is her mission to destroy King's Landing as everyone knows it. And you really do get to see that here. The way it's done, it's absolutely just, it's crazy to look at. It's a very drastic character shift for sure, but it really isn't that hard to buy into. I think it actually does make a lot of sense, and I get what they were trying to do here. They're trying to recontextualize what this show actually is about, which, of course, I'll get into a little bit later, but I think they did such a great job with this sequence, and I like that after that one scene with her going into, the village and just, burning down pretty much anything that's in sight. We don't see her after that. We don't see any more close-ups. We just see Drogon, and Drogon just completely demolishing the city because Daenerys is no longer Daenerys. Daenerys is a shell of what she used to be. She has become everything that she's detested, and it really is their way of saying that there is no going back here. There is no, Daenerys is no longer the person that we followed throughout this entire show, and you can see, how much this has taken a hit on her and how much this has affected her and how it really has altered her into this just vile human being and how much it really has destroyed her at that point. Again, I didn't think it was a very satisfying move at first, but this show has never been about characters getting redemption. This character has always been characters teetering through good and through evil, and Daenerys has always been one of them, and we definitely do get to see that here. But the other thing that I wasn't happy with at first is what they decided to do with Cersei. We were all wondering how this was going to go down. A lot of people thought it was going to be Daenerys versus Cersei, and it really isn't, because again, that's when Daenerys' course changed. She's no longer going after Cersei, she's going after the entire city. So because of that, Cersei is very secluded from everything this episode. She's in the Red Keep throughout most of it, and again, at first I wasn't really a fan of that, but I think it actually makes a lot of sense. What has been the one thing that has really affected Cersei throughout these last few seasons? Well, that would be her naivety, her extreme optimism that just everything is going to go the way she wants it to. The Red Keep, it's never been destroyed. That's not going to change now, and I love that scene where she's talking to Qyburn, who can tell that they are losing. There is no possible way that this is going to work out for them. There's no possible outcome where they do, continue to have King's Landing. No, they are very much losing here, and they are surrendering, and she needs to start ringing the bells. Cersei, still won't budge. She still believes that this is going to work out for them, and I like seeing that kind of stripped away from her, because look, Cersei, no, she's not a good person, and there definitely are a lot of things about her that I despise, but there are still moments where I have felt for Cersei. The shame scene, for example, seeing certain things that have played out for her, and seeing what she went through with Robert, going all the way back to Robert Baratheon and that horrible marriage that she had. I mean, sure, Cersei is a villain, but she still is human, and I like that we got to see that humanity in her. I like that we got to see the weakness in Cersei, which again is her naivety. If she didn't believe that this would work out 100% for them, she might have been able to survive. She might have been able to get out of this alive, but unfortunately, that's not how it ends up going for her. So I thought it actually made a lot of sense to go the way they did here. I can understand why some people might be disappointed, but look, the truth of the matter is, if Daenerys and Cersei were to actually have a fight scene, Daenerys would have beaten her within 5 seconds. I mean, she had a dragon, Cersei didn't. She could do whatever she could with the Golden Company. It just wouldn't affect her at that point. Daenerys is way too enraged, and she's just way too overpowered at this point for anything to not go her way, and you definitely do. I think definitely if they were to have had a scene, I think we definitely would have said that Daenerys is too overpowered. So I'm actually glad that they didn't have that face-off that we were expecting, and I think it makes sense to keep her there. And also as a testament to how great of an actress Lena Headey really is, that even in an episode where she really doesn't have a lot to do, we still care about Cersei. We still, we still are kind of feeling for her in that moment. And again, this is a woman that we absolutely despise. This is someone that we've loved to hate throughout the entire show. Remember, this is the woman that wanted to sentence Tyrion to death in season 4. This is the woman who, slaughtered that entire wedding of, Marjorie and all of them. She's killed, all of them. She's been behind so many various tactics throughout the show, but yet in this one moment, we see her vulnerability. We actually are feeling for her because she no longer is the worst person on this show, and I think it was very interesting the way they did that here. But of course, that's just the beginning of it. Things get much worse once the Golden Company, once they decide to surrender. They realize that, we're not going to get out of this. There's no possible way that we're going to win. They decide to surrender. They ring the bells, and it seems like everything is okay. It seems like this is it. But again, Daenerys is so adamant about making sure that this city is just completely blown to bits and that it is completely taken under siege, that she is not willing to just listen to their surrender. She's not willing for them to just win. No, that's not what she wants here. She wants to cause mass chaos. She wants to cause mass destruction. And because she's doing that, the Dothraki and Grey Worm take this as a sign that they need to attack. And look, I knew Grey Worm was going to lash out. I mean, he just lost Missandei. the one person that was closest to him. He watched it in front of his very eyes. So obviously this is going to affect him. It's going to alter him. And I was not surprised when he attacked the way he did. Even though they did surrender, Grey Worm is not going to let them get away that easily. He wants to kill someone. He wants to make sure that they pay for this. And that whole scene where we see the Dothraki, who we're supposed to be rooting for, and we kind of see them become evil through our eyes, and suddenly we're seeing them as the villains, and we're now seeing the guards of King's Landing as the victims, I think was actually a very harrowing sequence. It actually makes a lot of sense why they're doing that, because no longer does it feel like King's Landing has the high ground. No longer does it feel like King's Landing is in power. This is no longer a place of empowerment, a place that we fear. It's now suddenly a place of that has been completely overrun. It's now suddenly just a straight up war zone, and just that whole sequence of the Dothraki just completely decimating all of those guards. It's really hard to watch, and I can't believe I'm saying this for people that, a couple episodes ago, I probably wanted to be decimated, but the way they did it here was so convincing, and I love the way they handled that. I thought it was an absolutely just harrowing sequence. It was very hard to watch for sure, but they really pulled it off there. But in the midst of all this chaos, we do still have Jon, Tyrion, and of course Arya, which the Arya stuff we'll definitely get to. But the moment that I think really changes, like I said, up to this point, Jon, he's been very adamant about his beliefs, how, yes, he does see Daenerys as his queen, but nothing more than that. And Tyrion will always stick by her. But now, seeing what she is capable of, they're realizing, holy shit, they were actually right. And considering that the bulk of this season has really been Sansa, Arya, and all of them trying to convince Jon that Daenerys is not the queen that he thinks she is, and also, trying to convince Tyrion, it makes sense for them to go in this direction. I love the moment where, the Dothraki, they start decimating people, and Jon has that epiphany where he realizes, you know what? Sansa may have had a point. Arya might have had a point. Maybe I can't be loyal to her. Maybe I can't continue to remain on her side. Maybe I need to stop having this, conviction, and I need to just finally let it all out. And there's that moment where you think Jon is going to stay loyal, but he finally decides, no, I'm not going to do that, and he decides to protect all the innocent people. He tells them to get inside, and it's going to be very interesting to see where Jon does go from there, but I love the way that was done. And then Tyrion, we don't see a lot of Tyrion after all of this, but we do get that one moment where he is walking amongst all the rubble, and you can just see how disgusted and shocked he is. He genuinely did not think Daenerys was capable of something this inhumane, and it's going to be interesting to see where he goes as well. So that definitely was very well done, but perhaps for me, the best stuff in this episode comes from Arya and the Hound. I loved the way all of this was done. Look, we knew Arya was probably planning to kill Cersei. I knew she wasn't going to do it. I knew that there was no possible way that Arya was going to kill Cersei. It would not make sense with her narrative. It would not be a satisfying conclusion, and I am glad that that's not the way this played out. What we get instead, is probably the most impactful stuff in the entire episode. The moment between Arya and the Hound, where they enter King's Landing, and basically, the Hound starts to realize just how dangerous of a situation this is. And, up to this point, Arya's been like this fearless warrior. She really has been training to be this warrior. She's ready to get in there. But the Hound tells her at the last second, look, you don't want to be like me. You're not going to survive. If you try to kill Cersei, that's going to be your death. He knows that she is going to die if she moves forward with this plan, and I like that he tells her, get out of the city. You're not safe here. You need to move on with your life. And it's a very interesting direction for Arya, because again, last week I was saying, Arya doesn't want what Gendry has, but now it seems like maybe that is the case, because she's seen the type of destruction that Daenerys can really do, and how really how she isn't as powerful amongst all of it, and that she is completely defenseless in this situation. And that moment I thought was just so beautiful between the two. She even calls him Sandor for the first time. She doesn't call him Clegane. She doesn't call him the Hound. She refers to him by his first name, and it's just such a genuine moment. The Hound and Arya's relationship has been one of the best of the entire show. Where those two have gone since, the beginning of the show, it's been just crazy to see, and I love everything that they did with them in this episode. And again, just seeing Arya amongst all of the chaos and the rubble. The tracking shots with her in this episode, they were fantastic. Probably peak Thrones right there. I mean, when she's running away and she's trying to get away from the fire and things like that, and she's trying to protect all of these innocents, and she starts to realize that in this situation, she can't really do anything, even though she's been this warrior up to this point. She can't be that in this situation. She is going to be affected. She is going to be hurt, and we see her, throughout this episode, every time we come back to her, she's more bloody and battered, and that last sequence, especially, of her getting on that horse and riding out, I mean, it was just heartbreaking to watch. Here was someone who was so adamant about killing Cersei, was convinced that she had a chance at bringing her to justice, but then everything just got thrown out the window. The Hound, told her that she needed to go on her own. She now is basically realizing that she can't be what the Hound has, what she's kind of been trained to do. She's realizing that she can't emulate the Hound and that the Hound isn't happy with what he's really become. And now it's like, where's she really going to go from here? So I'm very interested in seeing where Arya's going to go from this point on. I think this is a very good move for her for sure. Again, Maisie Williams, just as an actress, this has easily been her best season. I mean, she has just been killing it all season. So many of these actors have, but Maisie Williams in particular, I mean, she has been impressing the hell out of me. And moments like this, again, just moments where she's running away, and you really do get a full idea of, like, what's really going on. And someone that is in this situation, that she is. It's devastating to watch, and I love the way all of that was done. And that leads to maybe the best sequence of the entire episode, besides, like I said, the stuff of Arya running in the city, which was just pure cinematic gold. Even if it's a TV show, that right there is about as close as Game of Thrones has gotten to a movie, and I love the way that was done. But the Clegane Bowl was so good. I love the way this was handled. Look, the Hound, he's been by Arya's side, but his main goal throughout basically the entire show has been to get to his brother, to exact revenge for, the sins that his brother's committed. He wants to bring the justice, and seeing him go up against the mountain, I absolutely adored. But what was even more shocking, besides that fight, which we knew was coming, obviously, but the most shocking moment of that entire scene was actually not the fighting between them. It was when they were with Qyburn, and, Cersei is telling, the mountain to stay by her side, and Qyburn says that as well, and rather than, push, like, Qyburn out of the way, he throws Qyburn lands on, he's, like, impaled, and that was easily the most shocking death. Look, Qyburn was a complete pussy. I mean, you saw that he knew that they were losing and things like that, but I did not expect him to go out quite like that, and that was definitely a pretty humorous moment. So it was a good balance of levity, I think, throughout the entire episode. Again, in such a dark episode, I think it was actually a good moment there that I definitely enjoyed. But the fighting between them was so good. Seeing how the mountain was overpowered and yet the Hound was still able to take him out, I loved. And the moment where the mountain, like, almost Oberon'd him, I was like, no, this is not going to be another Oberon situation. You are not going to get the upper hand this time. I love that the Hound continually was, like, stabbing him. He was like, why won't you die? But he realizes that there's no possible way that he's going to get out of this alive. So if he doesn't get out of this alive, they're just going to die together, and I love that so much. When he throws himself off and into the ashes, and they both die, it was such a satisfying moment, and the Hound is an absolute badass. They really have reminded us how great of a character he really is. The relation he has with Arya has been great, but this is everything that we've wanted to see the Hound do, and it was in full display here, and I love the way that entire sequence was done. So well filmed, and I adored everything about that. So great overall. Definitely for me, there's a lot of stuff to love about this episode, but that for me is probably the best moment in the entire episode. Absolutely adored it. And now, finally, I am going to talk about the Jaime and Cersei stuff, which, as I alluded to before, is my least favorite part of this episode. And look, I get what they're trying to say, that, Jaime, he feels guilt over what Cersei has done. He feels like, this is how I interpret it, that even though he could possibly become a hero, that he doesn't really feel like he's worthy because of all the things he's done for Cersei, and he feels like really the only ending that he has is by Cersei's side. But what I didn't like, though, and what I don't think made any sense, was the fight between him and Euron. Look, I know they're both vying for Cersei's affections, but literally nothing in any of these seasons, particularly the last two, because that's when Euron was introduced, was in season 7, nothing has been leading up to this. There has never been a moment this season where Jaime's like, you know what, I gotta overthrow Euron. Euron is a threat to Cersei or something like that. Cersei never gave a shit about Euron. The only reason she had Euron by her side is because Jerome was one of the only people that genuinely cared for her and genuinely wanted a future with her, even if it was, he was, the way he did it, he was definitely looking just for his self-interest, and he didn't really care about her as much as, say, Jaime does. I don't think there was any point that was leading up to that. So their whole fight, I thought, was really awkward and weird. The moment at the end where Euron says, like, I'm the one that killed Jaime Lannister, like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, I don't know what any of that was about, but Jaime does eventually find Cersei. They are, getting out of the Red Keep, and, he plans to execute what Tyrion and him talked about. He's going to try to get her to that island, but at the last moment, the place they're supposed to go to, the door has closed. The door is there, the rock and things like that. It's just not going to budge. There's no possible way to get out of there, and it's kind of Jaime accepting his death. He realizes, you know what, we're both going to die in this scenario. So basically, they do die in each other's arms. They die as this, building is collapsing, and basically the prophecy is fulfilled. There was a moment where Jaime's talking to Bronn, and he talks about how, the only way he wanted to die was in his sister's arms, and I do still think that's the case. My problem is not that. I get that that's what they were trying to do. My problem is I don't know what Jaime's arc is. I don't know what his arc was supposed to be this season, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I get what they were trying to do, but considering what we got with him and Brienne last week, and all of that, it just makes that feel a lot less consequential. It makes it feel kind of pointless, honestly. If Jaime didn't really care about the people in Winterfell, and he didn't really care about the people in King's Landing, like he alluded to Tyrion, why didn't he just leave after the battle? He easily could have done that. He easily could have just said, you know what, the battle's won, I'm gonna go, back to King's Landing where I belong. Why didn't he just do that? I don't really understand that at all. That doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I don't know why Jaime just stuck around, and I think he could have easily just taken off after. And also, I know that this is going to sound like a dumb complaint because, yeah, Cersei did die. I should be happy about that because, I wanted that. But it's not the way I really wanted her to go out. And I'm not saying that Jaime needed to kill Cersei because they established that, that would not work out. He was not going to kill someone who was, birthing a child and someone who, she was pregnant with his child, and he wanted her to be alive for that very reason, and they kind of established that, and okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. So having Jaime not kill her, I think even if he was going to kill her, this is what I think should have happened. Again, I'm not, I'm not Benioff and Weiss or anything like that, so I can't say completely what should have happened, but this is what I would have done. I think Jaime should have gone there. He wanted to kill Cersei. He had a plan where he was going to execute it. He was going to get her to that island, but he was going to try to kill her. He was doing that so he could get her away, so nobody could really stop him, and he was going to do it, but realizing that she was actually pregnant and she wasn't lying about it, because remember, he was never, I don't think he ever 100% believe the fact that she was pregnant, but that moment he realizes, yeah, she is definitely pregnant and she is going to have this child, and I really love that moment where, I think at that moment, that's when he should have been like, you know what, I can't kill her. So if they would have done that, I would have felt a bit more satisfied, but the way that Cersei died, I feel like she deserved a more noble end. Not a noble ending. She deserved a more satisfying ending. Her dying the way she did, I wasn't a huge fan of it. So yeah, needless to say, there is a lot moving forward in this finale. Of course, there's a lot that really can happen, and that's something that I really do love. I love the fact that we don't know where we're heading. I mean, up to this point, a lot of what we thought was going to happen is minus the Battle of Winterfell and things like that. A lot of the things that we were expecting to happen is what happened, but this is the first time where it's like, where did this come from? Like, I don't think anyone really expected this, but we should have. We should have seen this coming. We should have expected that Dany was going to go rogue. We should have expected that she was going to change her course of action. It makes total sense now. I mean, sure, she was always loyal to, say, her people, but that was when Missandei and Jorah and people like that were in the picture, but she doesn't have any of them at this point. So now she's going full out. She is doing what is in her best interest only. She doesn't care about who lives, who dies. As long as she exacts revenge, that's all she cares about. And I think it makes a lot of sense that Dany has gone in this direction. They really have recontextualized this entire character, but I like that they've done that, because now it gives you a reason to rewatch it. It gives you a reason to rewatch the show, look at certain scenes with Daenerys, and now we're going to see them in a different way. Moments where she was going to go darker, now we realize that if Missandei or Jorah weren't stifling her, she would have done it. She would have done this. I mean, this is something that it took a lot, but she finally did it, and I think this is something that has always been in her. There's always been that fire, quite literally, but an actual fire, in a literal sense, burning inside her. And you really did get to see that fire just finally explode in this episode. And again, I think this has been something that she's always sort of been capable of. We've just never really seen as that, because they've portrayed her as good up to this point. But that was the point. I don't think that was them rewriting things. I don't think that was an out of character moment. I think this is something that's just always been there, but it's been very subtle, and I think they did a very good job of that. And I honestly think it's a genius move to point her in that direction. And for someone like Jon, who has been so noble to her and who has been very adamant in that he still sees her as his queen, who is willing to still bend the knee, now seeing that scene, I mean, clearly he feels differently. I think at this point, Jon no longer can be that guy who is an oath keeper. He no longer can keep his promise to her. I think he is going to have to kill her. I think he's going to realize that there is no possible way that I can safely, get the people that, I can safely execute this plan and get the people that are still in this city and make sure that they get out of the city without bringing an end to Daenerys' reign. I think he is going to kill her. It's going to be very hard to watch for sure, but it makes sense why Jon is moving in this direction, and I think it's going to be interesting to see where they can go with that. But also, Arya could kill her, and look, I'd honestly be okay with that. I said last week that if Arya killed Cersei, she'd just be a Deus Ex Machina, but considering all of the terror and all of the just complete devastation that Arya just witnessed, it makes sense for her to want to kill Daenerys. I mean, she was never really buying into her sort of, act that, oh, I was doing what was good for the people. I was trying to bring an end to this tyranny. She never bought into it. And now that she sees what Daenerys has done, she's absolutely on her list. And if Arya did kill her, I could definitely see that happening. But there's also a possibility that Arya could try to kill Daenerys, and then Daenerys just, kills Arya at that moment, because it doesn't really seem like Daenerys is showing any mercy at this point, and if she did that, I really would not be surprised at all. So that could very much happen. Tyrion I think is probably going to die as well because of his betrayal to Daenerys. I think she's going to find out about it. I think they're going to have a moment, and I do think Tyrion is sadly going to be sentenced to death. It's going to be really sad to see, but maybe that doesn't happen. I mean, honestly, there's so many possibilities for what could happen moving forward, and that's something that I really do like here. I like the fact that, again, we don't know what's really going to happen. So all the stuff with Daenerys, I love. I thought all that was great. I love the stuff with the Hound. I thought that was a very satisfying conclusion. I love the way all of that was done. The stuff with Arya, just all of that was so great. And again, that moment with Varys at the beginning of the episode where he's telling Tyrion, I hope I'm right. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that I deserve to die. Tyrion's realizing, you know what? he was right. I should have listened to Varys. And I have no doubt that there's going to be a moment, or at least I hope there's going to be a moment in the episode between Jon and Tyrion where they're like, you know what, we should have listened to them. We should have, maybe we should have been more upfront. Maybe we shouldn't have been as loyal to Daenerys as we have at that point. Maybe Sansa was someone that had a point. Maybe we should have been a little bit more aware of what they were saying. And I think there's definitely going to be a moment like that. The problem is, I don't know how they wrap this all up in 80 minutes. I really don't. There's too much that needs to be done. I don't know how this happens. I hope that we get a really satisfying conclusion, but I do still feel that some things this season have been a little rushed. And that leads me to, like I said, my biggest con with the episode, and that's everything with Jaime. I don't know what his arc was this season. One moment, like I said, it seems like he is trying to make up for his mistakes, and he's trying to be this hero, and he's now fighting with Winterfell, and he's working with the Starks, and he seems like he was okay with Cersei's demise. It seemed like he wanted to be the one to, basically play the biggest part in Cersei's demise. He didn't really feel like anyone else could kill Cersei other than him. But instead, no, it turns out he is by her side, and he doesn't want to kill. And again, I get it. He didn't want to kill her because she was with child. That's fine. But the show telegraphed it that he was no longer on her side. He was seeing the deceit in her. He was seeing just how villainous she was and that she was not looking for his best interest. And I thought that he was finally starting to get away from her, but it didn't seem like that's the case. And I get it that they're trying to say that Jaime feels that because of all the guilt that he's done with Cersei, that he is no better than just being with Cersei, and he feels like he needs to be with her. So I get that. But in hindsight, it makes a lot of his development with Brienne and all that stuff, it makes it feel fairly pointless, and I don't really know what the point of that really was, and that does bother me. And I think if they would have given us like 2 or 3 more episodes this season, I would not be feeling this way. I feel like if they fleshed that out more, it could have been a far more understandable decision. Jaime's decision to go back to Cersei, then I could have understood a lot more, but because the season's only 6 episodes, some of it is a little bit rushed. I don't think all of it is rushed. Like I said, the Daenerys and Jon stuff, we've been building up to that all season long. So it makes sense why we are at this point where Jon basically has to kill Daenerys now. Like, there is no question about whatsoever. He needs to kill Daenerys, all the destruction, all of that stuff that we have been building up to. And it's stuff that has been, I think, percolating through Daenerys' head for a while. So that stuff isn't rushed. It's more just the Lannister stuff that is rushed. Cersei wasn't really a character until this episode this season. A lot of it was just her plotting things, and it didn't really go anywhere, the Golden Company and things like that, but it wasn't supposed to. I mean, I understand why that didn't go anywhere, so that's not a problem for me either. It's just, I do feel that there are a few plot developments, all the Jaime stuff, mainly that stuff, though, that does feel a little bit rushed, and I feel like if we had 2 or 3 more episodes to flesh this story out more, I would not be feeling the way I am right now. That being said, it does not at all undercut just how amazing of an episode this was. I mean, just everything we got here, just the total destruction, the cinematography was off the charts in this episode. Like I said, just the moment, the tracking shot of Arya just running through the city, trying to get out of there as quickly as possible, but also trying to simultaneously, help out the people that are still there and safely get them out of the city. Just such an amazing sequence overall. I love the way that was done. The Clegane Bowl, Daenerys' turn, even stuff like the scene between Jaime and Tyrion, Varys. I mean, this was just, a lot of this episode was, I think, a perfect sublimation of why we love the show as much as we do. It really was emblematic of what Game of Thrones is supposed to be. It was very cutthroat. The stakes were much higher than they've been in a while, and it is the first time in a while where I genuinely don't know where we're going from here, and I'm very excited to see how that really does play out. And look, Game of Thrones has never been a show that I've accurately predicted, but there have been some things I have accurately predicted. This is one of the few times where I don't really want to predict, because I feel like whatever they are setting up is not what we are expecting, and I'm excited to see where they really do go from here. So overall, this was such an incredible episode. I love where they end up going. It's almost my favorite of the season. It's just that Jaime subplot that really does hold it back for me. So with all that said, I am going to give this episode of Game of Thrones, Season 8, Episode 5, The Bells, overall in a minus. Like I said, I initially was not a huge fan of this episode, but I gave it a rewatch, and a lot more things made sense to me. And I know there's a lot of people frustrated at the show right now, and trust me, I do understand it, but I encourage those people who have seen this episode to go back and rewatch it. Don't think of what you want to happen. Think of the most logical thing that could happen. Think of things that they've been building up. Don't think of, because they didn't do this, therefore I didn't like it, because I was victim to that as well. I fell victim to the whole debacle of, reality versus expectations. If your expectations are astronomically high and you have like a checklist of all these things you want to happen, most times it's going to let you down. I think that's what we're seeing right now. I think it's less of this show is badly written and more of they did not do what I wanted to do, so therefore it's bad, which I don't buy into. I think definitely that's not true. I think you definitely should rewatch this episode, and maybe you won't, but I hope if you do, you'll get the same impact that I do. This is probably the most drastic I have changed on a piece of media in a very long time. It's not often I come away from an episode being disappointed and then rewatch it and think it's close to the best of the season, which I think is just insane overall, but it's an interesting discussion, definitely. I'd love to have a very civil discussion about Game of Thrones discourse, but apparently that's very hard these days. But either way, guys, in my review of this episode, like I said, I have no idea what's going to happen next week, but I am very excited to see how things do play out. That's it for my review. Hope you guys enjoy it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.